Hello everyone, good morning! So, sabi ko kahapon, magre-record ako, mag-upload ako, but unfortunately, nag-video ako, kaya lang, nung papakinggan ko na, nung panonoorin ko na, wala siyang audio. Okay? So, ngayon lang ako makakapag-record ulit. So, our topic for today is about risk factors underlying disaster. So, napapanahon siya kasi sa panahon ngayon parang sunod-sunod yung bagyong dumadating, di ba? So, ano nga ba ang ibig sabihin kapag sinabi nating risk factor? So, kapag sinabi nating risk factors, ito yung mga situation wherein we are exposed to danger. Ito. Let us read what is the definition of disaster. So, kapag sinabi nating disaster, it is a sudden calamitous event bringing great damage, loss, and destruction, devastation to life and property. So, yung damage na kinakos ng disaster is immeasurable. So, it varies from geographical location, climate and the type of Earth's surface, and degree of vulnerability. Kapag sinabi nating vulnerability, yan yung inability of the people or community to resist a hazard or respond when a disaster has occurred. For instance, people who live in plains, dun sa kapatagan, they are vulnerable to flood than people who live in higher up places. So, kapag ganon, nagkakaroon ng disruption in the society, function of the society, causing widespread human, material, or environment losses. Na kung saan yung people or community in that certain area has or exceeds the ability to cope using their own resources. And then, of course, it will influence the mental, socioeconomic, and political cultural state of the affected area. So, ito naman yung meaning ng disaster. This disaster came from a French word disaster, which means bad aster or bad star. Ang root word ng disaster comes from astrological theme which means or which the ancient used to refer to death, to destruction, deconstruction of a star or a disaster. Ancient people believed that disaster occurred due to unfavorable position of the planet or acts of God. Meron tayong mnemonics dito. Letter D stands for destruction. Siyempre, maraming mga nasisira sa kapaligiran, maraming mga properties. 'Di ba? Yung sa mga buildings, yung mga gumuguhong buildings. Okay, sa environment, maraming mga puno, ari-arian. Ang nawawala, loss. And then, incidents, sufferings, administrative, financial failures, sentiments, tragedies, eruption of communicable diseases, research program, and its administration. So, meron tayong causes and types of disaster. On the basis of cause and origin, we have two. We have the natural disaster. So from the word itself, you will have an idea of what natural disaster means. So natural disaster originates from different forces of nature. Ano nga ba yung mga example niya? Such as earthquake, volcanic eruption, typhoon, and cyclone. While for human-made or man-made disaster, ito naman yung mga instances that occur due to people's action against human, material, and environment, such as mga environmental incidents, air and train crashes, chemical spill, building collapses, and also we can categorize terrorism as an act of human-made disaster. While on the basis of speed and onset, dalawa. We have the sudden onset, biglaan, and we have the slow onset or yung mabagal siya, gradual. So, yan yung mga common natural disaster natin. As you can see, we have earthquake, tsunamis, volcanic eruption, landslide, blizzard, tornado, hurricane, ano to? Dust storms, flood, drought, wildfire, and sinkhole. So those are the common natural disaster in different part of the world na nararanasan natin. And then, ito naman yung mga exposed to natural disaster or to natural hazard. Kapag sinabi nating hazard, it is something that can cause harm. Example, electricity, chemicals, working up a ladder, noise, keyboard or a bully at work, or stress. Okay? So, under sa mga areas or location like coastal areas, exposed sila sa storm surge, tsunami, tidal waves. For reclaimed areas, they are prone to flooding, sinkhole, near fault line, earthquake, on foot of denuded mountain, mudslide, landslide. While for nil volcanoes, volcanic eruptions, riverbank and esteros, flooding and flash floods, where for open field, prone sila sa thunderstorm, hailstorm, and blizzard. Kapag naman sinabi nating risk, it is a chance whether it's a high or low chance that any hazard will actually cause harm to somebody. Ito naman yung mga areas and location wherein exposed sila, kung saan exposed sila. Near oil depot, exposed sila sa oil spill and pollution. Near mining projects, toxic waste. Near chemical plants, chemical fumes, chemical waste. Near nuclear plant, nuclear waste. Near factories, they are prone to factory waste and pollution. While for unsafe buildings and structure, of course, prone sila sa sunog. While in public places, in megacities, they are prone to terrorism. Kasi doon maraming tao. That's why, di ba, yung mga terorista, nag-aano pa nga sila nagsusuicide bombing sila. And most of them are, mga Muslim. Oo. Kasi iba ang paniniwala nila They have different perspective compared sa mga Christians. Kasi para sa kanila, since I worked before in abroad and they are telling that if they die, okay, if they die doing something for Allah, then definitely, directly, they will go to heaven at that very moment. So, yun yung paniniwala nila. That's why they are not afraid. Okay? So we have three phases of disaster. We have the pre-impact phase, impact phase, and post-impact phase. So when we say pre-impact phase of disaster, it is the initial phase prior to the occurrence. So bago pa pangyari, ito na yung initial phase. So during the pre-impact phase, a warning sign is given at the first sign as possible. Okay? So, binibigyan na ng warning about danger yung community. Okay? So, paano sila nagbibigay warning? Nagbibigay ng warning. Of course, with the aid of network and satellite. Okay? This is a period wherein emergency preparedness plan is put into effect. Okay? And also, during at this moment, communication is very important. Okay? Like television, cellphone, radio. Okay? Siyempre, sa television and radio, it is used to disseminate information on the community that there is an incoming disaster. Okay? Di ba, nababalitaan natin. Kaya na dumating yung bagyo na binabalita na siya sa TV. Nababalitaan na natin sa radyo. While for impact phase, this occur when the disaster actually happens. Okay? So, dito sa impact phase, ito na yung, it is the time of enduring, it is the time of hardship and injury. Okay? This is a phase wherein it may last for minutes, or even hours. Depende dun sa disaster na tatama. Of course, if earthquake, sabihin na natin, it will only last for a minute. Okay? If it is a typhoon, it will last for an hour. So this phase continues until the threat of further destruction has passed and emergency plan is in effect. Dito na yung emergency plan natin is taking into action. Dito na natin ini-implement. Dito na yung mga emergency operation is established and put in operation. O, ano yung mga ano yung mga emergency operation natin? Okay? So, dapat kunyari yung mga evacuation area, prepared na ba siya? Okay? Ready na ba para dalhin doon yung mga tao just in case na magkaroon ng flooding? Okay? And then, or karoon ng flood. Okay? And then we have the post-impact phase or the recovery. This recovery begins during the emergency phase and ends with the return to the normal and community functioning. So during the impact phase, depende kasi yung recovery sa tao. Okay? Let's say for example, the victims of Hiroshima bombing. So, yung mga naging victim noon, especially yung mga direct, it has an effect to them. Okay? It has a lifetime effect to them, especially in mental effect. Nagkakaroon sila ng trauma. Meron tayo kasing tinatawag na post-traumatic stress disorder. Wherein, after ng isang pangyayari sa buhay nila na sabihin na natin na severe okay, dito naman sa post-impact phase, it is recovery begins during the emergency phase and ends with the return to normal community functioning. Dito sa recovery in the post-impact phase, depende kasi yan for an individual. Meron yung iba, they can recover easily, but for some, yung impact sa kanila is too much that they are having a post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay? It leaves a mark, kumbaga na andun na yung terror, andun na yung takot sa kanila because of what happened. Okay? So, under level of disaster, we have three. We have level 1, level 2, level 3. Dito sa level 1, if the organization, agency, or community is able to contain the event and respond effectively with the use of their own resources, ito yung level 1. While for level 2, if it requires assistance from external sources. But this can be obtained, yung mga resources na yon, from nearby agencies. And for the level 3, if the disaster is of a magnitude, ibig sabihin, malaki yung pinsala, is of a magnitude that exceeds the capacity of the local community or origin and requires the assistance from state level and even federal assets. Kapag sinabi kasi nating magnitude, extent of something, it is the extent of something na gaano ba kalaki yung napinsala during the disaster. Okay? So, yun yun. Dito sa level 3, ito yung dito sa Philippines, let's say for example, may mga, di ba, may mga nagdaang mga disaster sa atin, like yung mga namalala, like yung Yolanda, ano pa ba, yung Undoy, wherein other state is helping or giving. Ito kasi sa Pilipinas, kasama siya sa mahirap na country. Okay? So, kapag nagkaroon ng disaster, especially if the extent or the magnitude is broad, yung resources natin hindi ganun kalaki. to provide for the needs of the community. So, kailangan natin ng help or other state is giving help to us. Okay? So, under disaster management, ito yung cycle natin. We have the mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. So, kapag sinabi nating mitigation, it is the measures, okay? Ano ba yung mga ginagawa to reduce the impact of or to reduce the harmful effect of disaster? While for the disaster preparedness, ito naman yung mga preparations na ginagawa. Okay? Preparations na ginagawa before yung disaster. And then we have the response and recovery. So dito, sabi niya dito, mitigation include measures to prevent disasters damaging effect of unavoidable disaster. Of course, hindi naman natin may iwasan na magkaroon ng disaster. Laging meron at merong dumadating. So, importante na meron tayong mga measures na gagawin para mabawasan yung harmful effect niya. Okay? Ano ba yung mga measures na yon? It includes recognizing and preventing potential technological disaster and being adequately prepared such event occurs. While for disaster preparedness, ang goal ng disaster preparedness is to decrease emergency response time and ensure that necessary equipment is available and on-site after the disaster. So dapat, bago pa magkaroon ng disaster na yan, kumbaga, nandyan na, naka-ready na, handa na lahat. Hindi yung saka palang hahanapin, saka palang dadating na, kunyari, I will give you an example, nagkaroon ng sunog. Tapos, dapat, kapag re-responde ka, is naka-prepare na lahat. Meron kasi yung iba, wala pang tubig yung sasakyan. So, it will take time. Okay? Kung doon mo palang gagawin yung mga yon. So, dapat, kapag nagkaroon ng sunog, on the spot, you are ready. Pupunta ka na lang doon. Kasi nga, ang sabi nga dito, ang goal nito is to decrease the emergency response time. Mapababa mo yung oras ng pagresponde kasi nga, you are saving life. So, every minute is important. Okay? Issues to include during preparation, okay? Or dito, in preparedness. It includes weather pattern, geographical location, expectations related to public events and gathering, age condition, and location of facility and industries in proximity to the hospital. Example, the nuclear power plant or chemical factory. So, ito yung mga preparations na ginagawa. Okay? First, you have to evaluate the risk of the country in a particular region to disaster. So, as I've said a while ago, nasabi ko yung mga location or areas wherein certain area is exposed to. Okay? Katulad nung plain areas, they are exposed to flooding, ganon. And then, you must adapt to the standards and regulations, organize communication information, and a warning system. Ensure coordination and response mechanism. Okay, dito sa ensure coordination and response mechanism, di ba sa munisipyo, meron tayong mga MDRRM. Okay? So, sila yung mga nakikipag-coordinate, okay? Sila yung mga nagre-responde kapag nagkakaroon ng disaster. Okay? Adapt measures to ensure that financial and other resources are available for increased readiness and can be mobilized in disaster situation. So dito, you have also to consider yung sabihin na natin transportation. Kasi although meron kang resources, kung sa transportation naman madidelay siya, so wala rin, di ba? It would be very difficult. So, kailangan mong i-consider yon. And then, develop public education program. I will give you an example. Dito sa DepEd, di ba, we have a pandemic. We are amidst pandemic as of today. So, ano yung mga programs na ginagawa ng DepEd to have a continuous learning even or in spite of pandemic? So, di ba, kayong mga estudyante, you have modular class, you have online distance learning, offline distance learning. So, yun yung mga programa ng DepEd para hindi ma-compromise yung pag-aaral ng mga estudyante. And then, coordinate information sessions with news media, organize disaster simulation exercise that test response mechanism. In every school, nagkakaroon ng earthquake drill. So, it is a simulation just in case that there will be an earthquake, so we know what to do. And then we have the response. Okay, aggregate of decisions and measures taken to, number one, contain or mitigate the effect of a disastrous event to prevent any further loss of life and or property, restore order in its immediate aftermath, and reestablish normality through reconstruction and rehabilitation shortly thereafter. And then as for the recovery begins when the disaster is finished and serves the community, establishing long-term medical care for those in need after a disaster, rebuilding and working to reduce the chance of future similar disaster from occurring. Ayan yung disaster management cycle. So during a disaster, it's very important yung triaging. So when we say triaging, it derives from French word trier, which means to sort out or choose. Okay? So si Baron Dominic Jean Larrey, a chief surgeon of Napoleon, is credited with organizing the first triage system. Kapag sinabi nating triage, it is a process of determining the priority of patient's treatment. Sino ba ang mauuna? Okay? Based on the severity of their condition. Oh, pag nagkaroon ng mass casualty, sino yung ipaprioritize mo? So, ito yun. Ito yung purpose of triage. So, we have the advantages. Ano nga ba yung mga kabutihang na idudulot ng triaging? First, it helps to bring order and organization to a chaotic scene. Oh, ito. Kapag merong mga mass casualty, okay, syempre, chaotic yung scene. Ibig sabihin magulo. Kasi syempre, maraming mga tao yung nasaktan, maraming may injuries. So, kapag may triaging, nagkakaroon ng organization. It brings order. And then, it identifies and provides care to those who are in greatest need. Helps make the decision easier. Assure that resources are used in the most effective manner. Oh, dito, sabi niya, nagbibigay siya ng, it provides care. Bibigyan mo ng care yung tao na higit na nangangailangan ng medical care or treatment. Nakakatulong siya para makapag-desisyon ka kung sino nga ba yung iti-take or your first priority. And assure that resources are used in a most effective manner. Let's say, for example, there is a person that even if you treat them or even if you give medical assistance, there is a little or no chance of survival. So instead of using that resources to those who have a little chance of survival, why don't you give it to a person who have a higher probability of living? So in that way, the use of resources is used effectively. Okay? And then, it may take some emotional burden away from those doing the triage kasi nga, they know that what they're doing is in the greater or it benefits the most person who needed that, kumbaga, yung the need, it benefits the person na nangangailangan the most. Okay? Intindihan ba? So now let's move on to principles. As of principles, every patient should receive and triage by an appropriate skilled health worker or professionals. So itong triaging, it is a collaborative decision. Okay? Collaborative planning. So hindi lang isa yung nagde-decide ang nagpaplano. It is a group. It is a team. It is a teamwork in a, sabihin natin, in a health institution. And then, it is a process that should not cause a delay in the delivery of effective clinical care. So, meron na kayong triaging, meron na kayong priority. You have set all the priority, the protocols, the standard. So, in taking it into action, dapat hindi na magkakaroon ng delay. Okay? Because time is very important in responding to the needs of individual who are needing treatment or medical assistance. So under types of triage, we have two. We have the simple triage and advanced triage. So dito sa simple triage, it is used in a scene of mass casualty. Maraming injured, maraming patient, maraming tao na nangangailangan ng assistance, ng medical assistance. Okay? In order to sort patients into those who need critical attention and immediate transport to the hospital and those with less serious injuries. So dito sa types of triage, meron tayong simple mnemonics dito, START, okay? Which S stands for simple, T for triage, A for, wala palang A dito, R for rapid, and T for treatment. So itong START, it is a simple triage system and can be performed by emergency and lay and emergency personnel during emergencies. So, meron tayong apat na group under dito sa start. We have zero or decrease or beyond help. Okay? Dito sa zero or beyond help, even if you help them, okay, they will die even if you give medical assistance. So, nakakategory siya sa zero. Dito sa zero, hindi ibig sabihin na yan nasa zero priority. No. Okay? Yan yung pinaka-last. And then we have number 1, the injured who can be helped by immediate transportation. 2, for the injured whose transport can be delayed. And 3, for those with minor injuries who needs less help. While for advanced triage, dito na yung doctor na ang nagde-decide, okay, that some seriously injured should not receive advanced care because they are unlikely to survive. Okay? Dito na papasok yung effective use of resources. Kasi nga, they are unlikely to survive. So, why don't you use the resources for a person who is likely to survive? Okay? And then, ito, we have the principles of advanced triage. I will read to you. First, do the greatest good to the greatest number. Okay? Gawin mo yung nakabubuti, pinaka-nakabubuti dun sa mas nakararami. And then, preservation of life takes precedence over preservation of limbs. Ibig sabihin, mas dapat unahin mo na i-preserve yung life ng tao instead dun sa mga extremities niya. Like, for example, itong mga upper extremities, lower extremities, or even eyesight. So, dapat unahin mong buhayin siya than saving parts of his body, his or her body. And then, immediate threat to life, uh, let's say for example, pag nagkaroon ng hemorrhage or bleeding. Kasi pag nagkaroon ng bleeding, uh, of course, given that there is a threat to life, siyempre, maubusan ka ng dugo. So, it is a threat to life. So, kailangan mong bigyan din yun ng emergency assistance. So, meron tayong mga classifications. We have class 1, kulay red siya. Meaning, immediate. Nangangailangan ito ng agarang tulong. Bakit? Kasi nga, yung mga victims, they have serious injuries that are life-threatening. But, of course, they have a high probability of survival. Kumbaga, they are in a critical condition, but uh, if given priority and treatment, malaki yung chance nila na mabubuhay sila. So, ito yung mga tao that requires surgery or other life-saving interventions and have the first priority for surgical team kapag may operations o kailangan silang operahan, they are the first priority to advanced facilities. Hindi na sila, hindi, yung mga cases nila, they cannot wait, but are likely to survive with immediate treatment. So, ano yung mga instances wherein nagkakaroon ng or nagiging critical yung situation nila? Kapag nakukompromiso yung airway. O, dito sa respiratory nila. Kapag na-compromise yun, of course, mamamatay sila. Kapag nagkaroon ng shock, kapag nagkaroon ng bleeding, mamamatay sila. Pero, kapag naman nabigyan ng proper treatment, mabubuhay sila. And then, we have the class 2, kulay yellow siya. Ito yung pwedeng ma-delay for 2 hours yung treatment nila. Okay? And their condition is stable for a moment. For a moment lang. But they require a monitoring. Kasi nga, there is a probability that if you will not or you will not monitor them, pwedeng maging critical yung situation nila. But it can be delayed for 2 hours. So, ano yung mga, ano na yun? Ano yung mga examples? Those who have major illness or injuries such as open fracture, chest wound. So, yun yung mga yun. And then, we have the class 3, kulay green. Ito yung kailangan nila ng minimal care. Sila yung mga walking wounded. They are ambulatory, nakakapaglakad. And the casualty requires medical assistance when all the higher priority patients have been evacuated or given care. Hindi na nila kailangan ng monitoring and victims whose care and transport may be delayed for 2 hours or more. So, sino yung mga yon? Sila yung may mga minor injuries, close fracture, strain, sprain, and sometimes itong mga class 3 or minimal sabihin na natin persons who have minimal injuries or kailangan lang nila ng minimal treatment, pwede silang tumulong dun sa mga tao na nangangailangan din ng tulong. Okay? Although even they are part of the casualty. And then we have the class 4. Ito yung mga severely injured. And they will die of their injuries. Possibly for days, hours. So, example nito, yung may mga large body burn, several trauma, lethal radiation, wherein their situation is life-threatening. Oh, ano pa? Yung may mga cardiac arrest. Itong may cardiac arrest, most of the time I experienced when I was working. Even if you are already in a hospital and you are ambulatory, meron pa yung iba na if they had cardiac arrest, namamatay sila. Okay? And ano pa? Those with severe head and chest wounds. Okay? they would be taken a holding area and given painkillers required to reduce suffering, dead or expected to die because of massive head injury, extensive fall thickness of burns. So yun yung mga example ng mga class 4 or expectant. Kulay black ang flagging nila. Kasi may mga color coding tayo dyan eh. O, ayan. Nasabi ko na before. So, ito yung parang pinaka-summary of the color coding. We have the black, red, yellow, and green. Well, next, for the risk factor underlying disasters. So, ano nga ba yung mga risk factors natin? So, let me enumerate to you some. So, we have severity of exposure. Okay? The amount of exposure to the disaster is highly related to risk of future mental health. So, kapag lagi kang exposed sa isang disaster, okay? Ano ang mangyayari? O sabihin na lang natin, huwag ng disaster. Sa pamamahay na lang o kaya sa personal life mo. If you are always exposed to a problem, what will happen to you? Of course, it will affect you. Diba? It will affect not only your future mental problem, but the totality of a person as a whole. Di ba? Let's say, for example, if you are, kasi di ba, ganito na lang yun. Your problem can either make you or break you. So, it depends upon the person. Yung recovery. Okay? So, nasa sayo yun. Depende sa mindset mo. But for some people, if they are always exposed to problem, ang nangyayari sa kanila, they are using this problem as kumbaga, para mas mapaayos yung buhay nila. Kumbaga, kumbaga, to inspire them. Okay? Meron naman yung iba, nagiging negative yung pananaw nila because of problem ng mga napagdadaanan nila. Okay? So, it depends as per individual. And then we have the gender and family. So, having a family member in the home who is extremely distressed is related to more stress to everyone. So, kapag meron kang kasama daw sa bahay na extremely distressed, it affects kung sino yung mga nakakasama niya. Okay? And then, as for the age, adults who are in range 40 to 60 are likely to be more distressed after the disaster. Thinking that if one is in that age range, he or she has more demands from job and family. So, yun yung dahilan nung mga nasa age bracket na yon, 40 to 60, na-distress sila because of the demands in the job and in the family. Kasi nga, pag nagkaroon ng disaster, o katulad ngayon, merong pandemic, yung mga 40 to 60 ang age nila, or sabihin na natin, those who have family, they are thinking where they will get money, especially kapag nawalan sila ng trabaho, what they will feed with their family, ano ipapakain nila sa mga anak nila. So that's why they are in distress. While for the children, okay, they show severe distress after the disaster, after disasters than adults do because their coping mechanism is not fully developed unlike of the adults. Okay? So, natatakot sila. They have fear. And then, developing countries. Disaster in developing countries like Philippines have more severe mental impact than disaster in developed countries. This is true even with less serious disaster. This may be due to resources. Kasi nga, Philippines is one of a poor country. Kaya nga, yung impact when it comes to mental health is more severe compared to developed countries. Kasi nga, meron silang resources, mayaman sila. They can contain yung effect nung disaster in their country. And then we have the low or negative social support. Okay? The support of the other can be risk or resilience. Kapag sinabi natin resilience, it is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or toughness. So social support can weaken after disaster. This may due to stress and the need for members of the support network to get on their own. But of course, itong social support, we need this one because, di ba, we are human being. If we are bombarded with a disaster or any problems, we need comfort from other people. Kasi yun yung nagpapalakas ng, kumbaga, nagpapalakas ng kalooban natin eh. Social support outside. Okay? And then, we have other factors specific to the survivor. Ito, were not functioning well before the disaster. So even before the disaster struck you, meron ka ng pinagdadaanan. So it is unlikely for you to cope up kasi nga kumbaga natabunan ka na ng a lot of problems. Okay? And then have had no experience dealing with the disaster. O siguro wala namang first time. First time na ma-struck ng disaster. Pero na lang kung ibang disaster. Okay? Baka naman hindi disaster kundi personal. And then we have or must deal with stressor after the disaster. So you are thinking, ano nang mangyayari in the future after this disaster? Okay? Or during this disaster or pandemic. O katulad ngayon, many people are under mental stress. Kasi nga, they are thinking, marami ang nawalan ng trabaho. There is a layoff. Oh. And they have to think, paano ko bubuhayin yung family ko? Okay? O kaya yung mga nasa lanta ng bagyo, siyempre, yung iba may mga utang pa yon, yung mga magsasaka. Paano sila makakabayad? So, yun yung mga iniisip nila after the disaster. So, you have to think of it. You have to deal of it. Okay? And then, those who have poor self-esteem think that they are uncared by others. That's why social support is very important. Okay? Pero not only social support, emotional support. Okay? But the most needed support you need for is coming from your family. And then, think they have little control of what happens to them, and then the lack of capacity to manage stress. So, in managing stress, each one of us have different way of managing our stress. So, you have to find which management suits you. Kasi it differs from person to person. But you have to have you have to have a good stress management. Kasi nga, kung hindi, what will happen to you? You will be always under anxiety. You will be depressed. And sometimes people, because of their inability to cope with stress, ano nangyayari sa kanila? Napapakamatay sila. Okay? While for other factors that can also be found to predict worse outcome, we have death of someone, okay, injury to self or other family member, life threat, panic, horror, or feeling like that during the disaster, being separated from family, especially among youth, great loss of property and displacement, or you have to leave your home. So, ito naman yung mga effects of natural disaster to human life. We have displaced population. So, you have to leave your home in a group, usually due to a sudden impact, such as earthquake, flood, threat, or conflict. Oh. So, kailangan mong umalis dun sa tinitirhan mo. Kasi nga, there is a threat to your life. No, hindi lang yan earthquake, hindi lang flood. O even terrorism, pag nagkaroon ng volcanic eruption. So, kailangan mo munang umalis. So, it's very difficult kasi nga, saan ka pupunta? Kailangan mong isipin yung mga yon, di ba? O, pag umalis ka, o paano yung trabaho? O, pero syempre, lahat naman kayo as a community doon. Pero syempre, yun yung mga instances na iniisip natin kapag nagkakaroon ng disaster. And then we have health risk. This is the adverse event or negative health consequence due to a specific event, disease, or condition. Kapag nagkaroon ng nagkaroon ng pagbaha, example, nagre-result ito in a stagnant water that allows the breeding of a waterborne bacteria. So, sa mga lamok, nagiging breathing nila yung stagnant water. That, consequently, it would cause or it would result to outbreak of dengue or malaria. And then, we have food scarcity, nagkakaroon ng kulangan sa pagkain. So, a shortage of food may happen when not enough food is produced, such as when crop fail due to drought, pests, or too much moisture. So, after a natural disaster, marami yung nagugutom. Okay? Kasi nga, may mga pananim na mga nasisira. Okay? So, anong mangyayari? Nagkakaroon ng decrease of supply or loss of agricultural supply. And kapag nagkaroon ng loss of agricultural supply or diminished supply, anong nangyayari? Tumataas din ang presyo. Okay? Tumataas. Nagkakaroon na ng kakulangan, mahirap na nga na nagkakaroon ng kakulangan, tumataas pa ang presyo. So, sino ang affected dito mostly? Ang mostly kawawa dito is yung mga nasa low class of the society o yung mga mahihirap. And then we have the emotional aftershock or stress reaction that appears immediately after a traumatic event. So sometimes they may appear a few hours, few days later, or it simply indicates that the particular trauma was just too powerful to manage without help. Okay, if it is too powerful to manage, okay, kumbaga sobra-sobra yung stress na yun, you need help. Okay? You have to have support with you, whether it's medical or whether it's emotional. So you have to seek support. Okay? Kasi, let's say for example, kapag nagkaroon ng traumatic situations, especially among youngster or among youth, among children, ano nangyayari? Nagkakaroon ng, it would result to post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a serious condition, serious psychological condition resulting to extreme trauma. And you have to address yung problem na yun. Okay? So, that is the end of my lesson for today. Thank you for listening, and I hope you will continue on learning, on studying, even in spite of this pandemic and yung ganitong modes of delivery of learning natin. Thank you.